Today, we're going to dig into something that's both fascinating and, yeah, pretty controversial: presidential executive orders. This is a power that has seriously shaped American history, for better and for worse, from pushing forward civil rights to causing some of the country's darkest moments. So let's get into it. So here's what's so wild about executive orders. Right from the start, we're talking about a massive presidential power. But if you go looking for it in the Constitution, it's not really there. It's not defined. There are no rules for it. Just think about that for a second. A tool that can literally change the course of the nation isn't spelled out in the founding document. And that gray area, that's exactly what makes them so incredibly powerful and also so debated. So, because the Constitution doesn't really lay it all out, the power of an executive order has been defined over time by the presidents who've actually used it. Let's take a look at how its meaning and its use have changed so dramatically throughout American history. Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What is an executive order, really? At its core, it's an official command from the president. It's legally binding, and it's aimed at the federal agencies and the people who work in them. Now, its authority is generally understood to come from Article 2 of the Constitution. That's the part that gives the president executive power and tells them to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So when an order is based on that authority, yeah, it carries the full force of law. And this is where the story gets really compelling. Because this one tool, this single type of power, has been used for completely different, even morally opposite goals. Let's start with a landmark moment. It's 1948, and President Harry Truman is getting nowhere with a Congress that keeps blocking civil rights legislation. So what does he do? He uses his power as commander-in-chief and issues Executive Order 9981. This order mandated the desegregation of the entire U.S. military. Just like that, he went around the gridlock in Congress to make a huge social change. It's a perfect example of how an executive order can be a real force for progress. But now, let's look at the flip side. Just 6 years before that, in the middle of World War II, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. This order gave the military the authority to forcibly remove and imprison about 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast. And get this, most of them were American citizens. It's remembered as one of the worst violations of civil liberties in U.S. history, and it was all done with the stroke of a pen. And look, these powerful examples aren't just a couple of isolated incidents. They're part of a much bigger story about how presidents have used this power. And when you actually crunch the numbers over time, you see this one specific period where the use of executive orders just completely exploded. Just let that number sink in for a minute. 3,725. That is the record for the most executive orders issued by a single president. Any guesses who it was? Yep, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And what's really wild is the scale of it all. I mean, FDR is in a category all his own, but you can see that the presidents before him, like Woodrow Wilson and Calvin Coolidge, were also issuing them by the thousands. This wasn't just a blip, it was a major trend. The early 20th century was absolutely the age of the executive order. So why the huge jump? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm. In the early 1900s, you have the rise of what's called the modern presidency, where presidents started to become much more active in making policy. At the same time, the federal government itself was getting way bigger with more and more agencies to manage. And then the big one. This period saw the country's greatest crises: World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. All of these emergencies required fast, decisive action, like when FDR used executive orders to literally create new government agencies for his New Deal, completely sidestepping the slow process of Congress. Now, hearing all this, you might be thinking, wow, a president can basically do whatever they want, right? But the system was designed with checks and balances for a reason. And the crucial thing to remember is that this power, as big as it is not absolute. Which brings us to the big question. What happens when a president pushes it too far? Is there a limit? And the answer is a definite yes. And it was spelled out in a really famous Supreme Court case. So here's what happened. During the Korean War, President Truman was worried that a strike by steelworkers would threaten national security. So he issued an executive order to seize the nation's steel mills. Well, the steel companies sued, and the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. In a landmark decision, the court ruled against the president. They said he had overstepped his authority and that the power to seize private property belonged to Congress, not him. And this case became this incredible lesson. A president's executive order can't violate the Constitution, and it can't take away powers that are explicitly given to another branch of government. So in the end, the executive order is still a bit of a paradox, isn't it? It's a tool for quick, decisive leadership. It's a way to achieve historic progress. But it's also a potential threat to the balance of power. And that tension, that's not just history. It's a central debate in American politics right now. So the next time you hear about a new executive order, remember this dual legacy, the power to do incredible good and the power to do incredible harm. And it makes you ask, where's the line between bold leadership and an overreach of power? That's a question every generation has to answer for itself.